I'm Amita Sharma. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, taking a stand against racial harassment. The San Diego rally supporting students at the University of Missouri.
What does the mayor's meeting with NFL owners really mean for the Chargers? I'm Peggy Pico with analysis from a former Charger turned NBC sports director. Then,
how do you say no to God?
A researcher and former San Diego priest tells how his work ended up in the movie Spotlight, a new film about the Boston Globe breaking the Catholic Church sex scandal.
But I think the thing that gives me the adrenaline, which I'm not necessarily an adrenaline junkie by any means, is never knowing who's going to walk in the door and what they're going to need.
Adventures in frontier medicine, meeting the challenges in healthcare access in San Diego's backcountry, and the major upgrade that is a dream come true for neighbors. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Customs and Border Protection says it won't be requiring body-worn cameras for its officers anytime soon. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has more.
Customs and Border Protection isn't ruling out the possibility of requiring body-worn cameras in the future, but says it needs more time to investigate the technology. The decision comes after an internal study said rugged border environments, including extreme temperatures, are not ideal for body-worn cameras. It also said the cameras could hurt morale. The agency says it plans to review existing fixed camera infrastructure to see if extra cameras are needed around ports of entry. Local immigrant rights groups reacted with frustration, saying the agency needs to require body-worn cameras for its officers because of its use of force record. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Scripps Institution of Oceanography announced a $700,000 gift from a private firm to help support an earthquake early warning system. San Diegans could be warned approximately 20 seconds before a large earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. On the much closer San Jacinto Fault, an early warning could mean just 5 to 10 seconds, enough time to slow trains and sound alarms. The alerts could soon be a reality thanks to a new collaboration. Scripps Institution researchers operate a network of 28 earthquake monitors across Southern California. Mike Price, Chief Technology Officer of Seismic Warning Systems, says his company also provides seismic detection and designs warning systems.
We put a device in every facility, say a school. A school will have a device connected to their public address system. And that device will automatically produce a warning sound and a warning message that the school children and the teachers have been trained to respond to mean drop, cover, hold. We do that in a couple of schools already.
Scripps seismologists say the San Jacinto, San Andreas, and Elsinore faults that surround San Diego County have an increased probability of rupturing within the next 30 years. Supervisor Bill Horn is challenging the advice of the California Fair Political Practices Commission to recuse himself from voting on Lilac Hills. It's a major new development proposed less than 2 miles from his ranch. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John is following this.
Lilac Hills would build 1,700 homes, enough for a community the size of Del Mar on agricultural land east of Valley Center. It's considered a test case for the county's general plan, which took more than a decade to develop and allows for only about 100 homes on the rural area. What makes this conflict of interest issue a big deal is that without Horn's vote, the project would almost certainly fail to get county supervisors' approval. Horn initially called the advice to recuse himself, quote, outrageous, but he accepted it. Now he's challenging the FPPC's conclusion that the Lilac Hills decision will have a, quote, reasonably foreseeable financial effect on his property value. He writes that because his 33-acre property includes a floodplain and steep slopes, only about 7 homes could ever be built on it, and furthermore, that he has no plans to subdivide or develop his property. The legal division of the Fair Political Practices Commission has 21 days to decide if the letter constitutes new information that would change their advice. Meanwhile, the supervisor's vote on Lilac Hills has been postponed till early next year. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Standing with Mizzou, thousands of students took part in walkouts and rallies at San Diego State and colleges around the country today, raising awareness about racial harassment on campus.
Solidarity for Mizzou! Solidarity for Mizzou!
Matt Hoffman shot this video. They wore black outside Hepner Hall. They rallied in support of students at the University of Missouri, where they blasted the handling of racial complaints by campus leaders. On social media, students are sharing their personal experiences with racism, using the hashtag #BlackOnCampus. Missouri's President Tim Wolf resigned Monday. The governing board appointed Michael Middleton, a recently retired black senior administrator, to serve as the university system's interim president. A new bill could require mandatory sexual harassment training for California's local elected officials. A San Diego Assemblywoman plans to introduce legislation in January that would call for officials to undergo training within 6 months of taking office. She says the bill stems from former San Diego Mayor Bob Filner's sexual harassment scandal. A federal appeals court rejected a challenge to California's death penalty. The court reversed a lower court ruling that found the state's capital punishment was unconstitutional. The lower court had found delays in carrying out executions amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. More than 900 people have been sentenced to death in California, but only 13 have been executed since 1978. 15 counties in California will divide $500 million to build jails that can house long-term inmates. The Board of State and Community Corrections awarded the funding today. The State Sheriff's Association says current facilities weren't built to provide the necessary care. Since 2011, prison realignment counties have held lower-level offenders formerly incarcerated in state prisons. Protesters filled the meeting room. The legislature authorized the $500 million in bonds last year. A new ballot proposal would divert California's high-speed rail money to water. 2 Republican lawmakers proposed redirecting about $8 billion from the state's high-speed rail project to build water storage. The initiative also aims to amend the state constitution to give drinking water and irrigation priority from California's limited water supply. San Diego Zoo officials are pushing forward with an aggressive effort to keep the northern white rhino from going extinct. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has details.
The San Diego Zoo is committing $2 million a year to develop a strategy to keep the northern white rhino from going extinct. Randy Rikas is the curator of mammals at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. He says only 4 northern whites are still alive. One of them lives in San Diego.
We want to be able to hand off a herd, a sustainable herd of northern white rhinos to some of these young kids here that are budding zoologists. So we're hoping today that some of these young kids here take up the role of working with and being animal conservationists, and that we are able to give them animals so they don't have to see them in a book.
The key to reviving the species lies with 6 southern white rhino females brought to San Diego last week. They came from South Africa and will help researchers develop a plan for reproduction.
Any technologies that we can develop and optimize for the southern white rhino, we can use directly for the northern white rhino. We also will be using these young reproductive age females, very healthy, robust animals, as surrogates for embryos that we create from the northern white rhinos.
Those involved in the effort are optimistic they'll succeed, but the technology to make it successful has yet to be developed. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Following up on the drama over the Chargers, the latest chapter had San Diego's mayor starring on a New York stage. The latest twist involves a Disney executive and rival home in the city of Carson. Peggy Pico has analysis of the latest news swirling around the San Diego Chargers.
Joining me with a closer look at how recent events are heating up in the long-running Charger saga are my guest, former Charger linebacker Jim Lazovic, sports director at NBC San Diego, and Tony Manolatos, owner and CEO of Apex Strategy and a consultant to the mayor on stadium issues. And Tony, what did Mayor Faulkner hope to accomplish in meeting the team owners, NFL team owners in New York this past week?
Well, he wanted to sell them on San Diego and sell them on this plan. And he felt really good coming out of that meeting. The mayor and his team felt like what they set out to do in New York City, they accomplished. They felt really good about the feedback and the questions that they received at the meeting.
So that's what I was going to say. They got some good questions that said what?
Well, the questions weren't about the validity of the plan or about downtown. The questions were about, hey, what certainty can you provide us? We like the plan. We like what you're presenting here. What certainty can you provide us with a June vote?
Yeah, and I think what the owners saw is, even though the Chargers are not cooperating with the city and the county right now, the city and the county are going ahead with its plans, and the plans are making sense. And so you hear one story the owners do from Fabiani and the Chargers, another from the city, and it's important for the city to get its point across.
Now, what do you think about the Chargers and Raiders hiring Disney CEO Bob Iger? Is this a game changer, Jim?
I don't, Tony's enlightened me a little bit over the past hour. We've been sitting in the green room. It is. I think it's eye candy. It gets your attention, and then when you pull back and see what it entails, well, not really. I mean, it is another piece, and I wish the Chargers would go out and get. I mean, the city would go out and get its own Bob Iger. Let's find our own billionaires who want to invest in the city and invest in the Chargers.
Well, Jim, as a former Charger and sports director at NBC San Diego, what do you think about the Chargers teaming up with the Raiders? Do you think that's an option that could work? You're both laughing.
Well, it's unbelievable. I've always thought this is a head fake on the part of the Chargers, the whole Carson thing. But they are lining up a lot of impressive help. Iger's part of it, and Goldman Sachs, obviously, and the Raiders seem somewhat committed to this whole scheme. But I continue to think it's a head fake. And as a former Charger player, I mean, we battled against the Raiders. They were our bitter rival, and they were obnoxious, and they let us know that they have one of our Super Bowl trophies. And so, yeah, I don't like the thought. I don't see them both continuing in the AFC West. I mean, how can that happen?
Let me have Tony weigh in on that, because you were laughing the whole time, too. Bob Iger, Disney, and also this idea that you could have the Raiders and Chargers on the same team, so to speak. I'm
a fan of Disney. We're Disney Vacation members in my family. But, yeah, this was just window dressing. We saw it as a Hail Mary pass, a PR stunt, if you will. If the Chargers were winning the race to L.A., and if the NFL didn't like what they saw in San Diego, you wouldn't be seeing this announcement made the way it was made to try to step on the mayor and Ron Roberts meeting in New York City. The Raiders, Chargers, yeah, I mean, look, I grew up on the East Coast, but everybody understands that the Raiders and Chargers rivalry is intense.
Right. Boston and New York. All right. We have this rivalry. Do you think that L.A. fans would cozy up to either team?
Well, we were talking about that earlier, and that's a tough sell. The L.A. market is very busy, and you have to be playing really good ball to get the attention of the Angelinos, who have a lot of options. In San Diego, it's a different story. We have options here. We have a great climate here, but the Chargers own this market. There's no competition for them here in San Diego.
Let me ask you this, Jim. The Union Tribune's Kevin Acey wrote that San Diego could end up with the Raiders if the Chargers left. What do you think about that? A real possibility?
Well, the moment the Chargers leave, we'll be looking for a different team, and we would embrace whichever team came our direction. I honestly believe that, even the Raiders.
What do you think about that, Tony?
Well, he actually enlightened me today. He said, have you seen the attendance numbers this year? I said, no, I haven't. He said, they're still selling over 60,000 seats.
66,000, 68,000. Well, there are football fans in this town, and that's the message the NFL has to get. We are football fans in this town. We're a good sports town, too.
And, Jim, we'll end on this. What would losing the Chargers mean to San Diego?
Oh, we're still a great city. Obviously having played for them and covered them for 35 years, I'd hate to see it happen, but we're going to be a great city regardless. I think, though, having a new stadium is a great regional asset, and it's important for us to continue as a city to have structures like that so we can house more than just pro football. But, yeah, perfect scenario, don't leave, so I don't have to answer that question.
All right, Jim and Tony, thank you so much.
Thanks, Peggy.
Thanks, Peggy.
Rolling out a new push to help people sign up for Covered California. The statewide bus tour will help educate people who do not have health care. The tour started in San Diego earlier this month. Its final destination is in Eureka. They hope to sign up at least 2 million people. Officials say to go without health care just doesn't make financial sense.
So these deadlines really matter because Every day you're going without insurance coverage, you're rolling the dice. Rolling the dice on potentially ending up in the ER, walking out with a $40,000 debt.
As many as 4 million Californians do not have health care. 2 million are living in the country illegally. The city of San Diego is home to numerous primary care doctors and medical specialists, but it's a different story in San Diego County's backcountry, where access to care of any kind remains a major challenge. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg tells us about a clinic in Campo that's the only provider for miles around.
Here's something you probably won't hear in a doctor's office in La Jolla.
Because he seemed to think that me getting kicked by the calf caused
the blood clot.
Nurse practitioner Carol Lieber has heard this kind of thing before. She works in the East County town of Campo, where being kicked by a calf or cut by a chainsaw are routine complaints.
But I think the thing that gives me the adrenaline, which I'm not necessarily an adrenaline junkie by any means, is never knowing who's going to walk in the door and what they're going to need.
The community health center in Campo sits in a double-wide trailer. Other than Indian Health Services on the Campo Indian Reservation, it's the only place to get care in an area that spreads over 950 square miles. A doctor comes here once a week. Otherwise, for 16 rural communities, Lieber is it.
Knock, knock. Some of the worst case scenarios we'll see are patients that are on medications that need a high level of monitoring, and they live down a 5-mile dirt road. They have no transportation, spotty cell phone service, and they can't necessarily get back in here on a regular basis.
That's when Omar Acevedo comes to the rescue. 5 days a week, he picks up patients and brings them into the clinic.
I got a client way back on the mountains. I drive like for 15 minutes on the road. I'm like, okay, I'll get there someday.
The nonprofit Mountain Health operates community clinics in San Diego, Escondido, and Alpine. In contrast to those well-equipped facilities, the Campo Clinic doesn't have its own lab or x-ray machine. And the closest hospital? Grossmont in La Mesa, about an hour's drive from here. You can forget about specialists in this part of San Diego County, but mental health care is available through the clinic's telemedicine service.
This is the device that does it. We have the patient at one end, and then we have the provider, whether they're a psychologist or psychiatrist, at the other end, and they can talk essentially face-to-face, and it works really, really well.
Some people live in Campo for the wide open spaces, but others move here because they can't afford to live in San Diego. As it turns out, there's a lot of poverty in this area. That's why Mountain Health goes beyond the call of duty and provides hot meals to local seniors in need. Staff prepare the food from scratch. They cook up 150 meals 3 times a week. For people who can't make it into the community center to eat, drivers will take the food to them. Coordinator Esther Matos says some of their clients live in isolation.
So the driver that we send out there is probably the only person that they will see for a while. So we actually take a lot of pride on that, and we actually get to socialize and they get to spend a lot of time with them.
Mountain Health CEO Judith Chaplin grew up in this area, and for as long as she can remember, people have been clamoring for more medical services. They're finally going to get them. Mountain Health is getting ready to build a 2-story medical complex that will offer a wide array of services, including the region's first dental clinic. The complex will cost $9.8 million. Chaplin says they've secured most of the funding through federal grants and loans. They'll have to hit up donors for the rest. Chaplin says it's taken decades of hustling, planning, and fundraising to make the health center a reality.
And it's an amazing experience to see a vision and a dream that the community had that I personally embraced because I was a member of this community, and then to see it actually happening. It truly is a dream come true for us.
The new clinic represents a major upgrade for rural health care in San Diego County. It should be open for business by the end of 2016. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. Under the Microscope, a new film takes a closer look at the award-winning investigation that blew the lid off the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandal. It was led by the Boston Globe. Peggy Pico talks with a key researcher in the investigation.
The film Spotlight, now showing in San Diego, accurately portrays how the Globe relied on research about sex and celibacy in the church by a former San Diego priest. Take a look.
When you're a poor kid from a poor family, and when a priest pays attention to you, it's a big deal. How do you say no to God?
His startling research found 6% of Roman Catholic priests had molested minors. Joining me to talk about his role in uncovering the scandal is researcher and former priest Richard Sipe. And Richard, when did your research begin, and what did you start out researching?
Well, I was in 1960. I was a priest and a monk, and I was commissioned by my superiors to study about the mental health problems of Roman Catholic priests. And so I was sent to the Menninger Foundation and later to a hospital that specialized in this.
I see. Now, how did you get priests, moving it forward a little bit, how did you get priests to admit that they had sexually abused children?
Well, many of them were patients. Many of them were in trouble. Many were consultations by bishops and superiors, what do I do with this? And many were victims, people who came with anxiety or depression, and they wouldn't say anything, and little by little as you helped them uncover their pain, they would say, Father did this to me when I was 6 years old, or 11 years old, or 13 years old. And somehow you put it all together. It's a little bit like the process of the investigative journalism. I think that's why we hit it off so well, because we had to approach the problem that same way. We know there's a problem here on the top, but how do we get to what's going on with it?
In digging down a little deeper on that, you found about 6% of priests had been accused of abuse. What did that mean in real numbers?
Well, what that means is that there are, on the bishop's list, 6,000 priests. If you take over a period of years, 100,000 priests, 6,000, they are named. Now, this is whether they're named or not. See, Boston eventually discovered 10%. Los Angeles, we can record 11.5% of priests getting involved with minors.
So that was just the starting number. Now, in this film, you were never seen. Only your voice was heard on a conference call. Is that an accurate depiction?
It is. It's wonderful. My wife was a psychiatrist, and I did meet with a whole team in October of '01. And we met for a whole afternoon, met with Marty Barron, et cetera, et cetera. But then the consultation was on the phone. And I know I met with the director and the writer, and they kind of half apologized with not having a face or a body with me. And I said, no, this is much more powerful because it gets closely to the accurate kind of thing. These are the journalists working on this.
Let me ask you about that. Why did you agree to talk with the Globe's reporters and journalists?
Oh, why not? I've had over 5,000 interviews since 1990 when my book came out and said that at any one time, only 50% of priests are practicing celibacy. That was the main discovery. The 6% happened to gain prominence because of the legal system and so on.
I see. How has the local Catholic diocese responded to this movie's release?
I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody who's responded to it. Mark Sauer just told us that the national bishop sent out a letter to every parish telling them that this movie is coming out and how to respond to it, etc. They're still defensive. The system has not changed.
And that was my next question.
Okay.
The system hasn't changed,
no.
But what's being done, there are actions being done when the Pope was here to ensure that this isn't happening like it was before.
Well, the Pope's attitude is wonderful. If that attitude prevailed in the church and in the hierarchy and superiors, the system really would be gone. I've often said the system comes from the top. If there were no tolerance in the bishops and superiors and confessors and rectors for sexual activity by their priests, we would not have this problem.
Well, I have to end it there. I want to let folks know that they can see more on Spotlight and where it's showing. It's kpbs.org. Researcher and former priest Richard Sipe, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eichel on the next News Hour, making sense of an innovative approach to education, where students are encouraged to teach each other. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
A new arts program will bring San Diego youth closer to the main stage. The program, My Voice in the Arts, will offer young students in 8 San Diego neighborhoods free full-season subscription to San Diego opera performances. Students will also be able to go backstage after performances to meet and learn from the singers, performers, and crew. You can find the link to apply at kpbs.org. Cool autumn weather on tap for the weekend. A mix of sun and clouds by the beaches with 70s. Things are cooling down in the inland valleys with 80s and 60s. Sunny skies in the mountains with 60s and 50s. 80s and 70s in the desert. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom on Morning Edition. Too sweet for your own good. A San Diego forum explores the downside of all those sugary soft drinks. The study that shows people need to cut back. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.